Welcome to the Boom Effect, where we're building our outstanding mindset. Remember, as you do, this will have a tremendous effect on your success and allow you to bring the boom.
Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning, wherever you are. This is Tim, the Coach Scholze, coming at you with Scott, the GOAT, Terrizzi, on our very first podcast called The Boom Effect. And what the Boom Effect stands for, building our outstanding mindset, aka the boom, and the effect it can have on your life. And today's conversation is going to surround ourselves around confidence and conviction. And quick introduction of myself first is I'm Tim Scholze. I've been doing sales and leadership for over 25 years. I started off as a salesperson, finished Rookie of the Year my very first year, finished number one my second year, really got a passion for sales and ultimately wanted to get into leadership. Been in the leadership game since 2022. Just celebrated my 25 years of being in this industry. I work for a company called Hayabu, which is a digital marketing company, and love teaching and coaching people and helping them all the way. And my friend, somebody that I rely on to, that is, when they say iron sharpens iron, he is the other part of my iron that helps sharpen me. And let him introduce himself. But Scott Terrizzi.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Appreciate you having me. I started a little more recently with Hayabu. I'm also with Hayabu, but I started 22 years ago. Been in sales and sales management the whole time. Having a blast. Love leading people. Love helping business owners, more importantly, achieve their goals along the way. So it's been a fun ride, and I really appreciate you having me on the Boom Effect. Pretty cool.
Yeah, you're welcome. And our topic today is going to really be surrounded around confidence. And I'm just going to kick us off with a little quote here, and kind of how we got to this point in time and why I'm starting with this as our first topic, right? The quote is today is, confidence opens the door, conviction walks through it and gets the deal signed. The reason why I chose this particular topic to start with is we talk to people all the time. You know, Scott and I tend to do a lot of meetings together. And one of the things that we constantly hear about is conviction, or is confidence. You know, my confidence, my confidence, confidence. It really got me diving into the confidence element a little bit more and started doing my own research on confidence, where there's different degrees of confidence or different elements of confidence, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But why I wanted Scott to be a part of this, Scott did a training for one of our kickoffs about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago at this point. And he did it all in confidence. And his intent was building people's mindset along the way, but I think people took it too much from a emotional standpoint of confidence, not necessarily confidence in your abilities and your convictions to move forward along the way, which is why we're here. But I'll start off with this, and Scott, we can just unpack this a little bit as we go through this. But through my research and I came across this guy named Myron Golden, and he's got a great video. If you get a chance to look him on YouTube, it's called How to Have Unshakable Confidence. Incredible 38 minutes of content, and it really made me want to dive in a little bit further, right? So as I'm going through this, I'll start with just the roots of the words, because I think it's interesting and love to get your take on this here in a second, Scott. Is when you break down the word confidence, the Latin root, the first part is con, which means with, and then fidere, which means to trust. So with trust. So the meaning of the word is trust in oneself to take action despite uncertainty, which I thought was really interesting. Is that really it's a confidence about trusting in yourself. And when people say they don't have a lack of confidence, are they saying they don't trust themselves? What's your feel on that?
I don't know, that the uncertainty piece is interesting to me. Like, uncertain, what are you uncertain about? I think about sales in particular. Are you uncertain about your part of the process, or are you uncertain about what the prospect's going to say? Because if you're uncertain about both of those things, you're in trouble, right? So there's different parts of uncertainty that I think can creep their way into people's minds when it comes to sales. But it's with everything. If you're worried about the most variables possible and you're uncertain about all the variables, you're going to be in trouble. But if you focus on the things that you can control or the things that are under your control, and you keep those things to where you're not uncertain about those, you're relatively certain about those things. The uncertainties are minimized to the areas where you kind of can't control. You're going to be in a much better position from a confidence standpoint, in my opinion. So from that piece, that's what I got.
Well, let's take it a little step further, right? So conviction, right? We're going to break that down. Latin word con in this particular case means completely, and then vincere, to conquer. So to thoroughly conquer, that's conviction. And another way to look at it is a deep held belief that overcomes doubt and drives action. And I think that's where I come into play when I think about confidence. I think it's confidence leads to conviction, right? Which we'll unpack here in a little bit. But a little thought for you. Confidence gets you in the game. Confidence keeps you in it when it's hard, unpopular, and lonely, right? Like you have confidence. People start a job. They tend to start with some confidence that they think they can do this, right? That's where they have it. They really don't necessarily have conviction yet, unless they're coming from another industry similar to what they're doing, or if they've been in sales, they may have confidence in their sales game. But it's just a very interesting piece of it. Like I love the word conviction because I love that fact to thoroughly conquer, right? And I think when I think about you, Scott, I think about your conviction in things we discuss, and we're always and I say this kind of give the audience a backdrop here. Literally, as we're preparing for this podcast, we were going back and forth, and Scott, I'm a really bullish mindset on certain things. And Scott kept saying to me, we'll see. Right. And, it's challenges me in my own way. And I think that's why it bothers me is the fact is I want to conquer these kind of things. And whether or not this takes off or not, that part of it we will see. But I will say this, that I will conquer the fact of being able to do a podcast that has good content. So I will conquer that in that base. I have conviction in our relationship. I have conviction in our conversations, Scott, that we will deliver goods. Whoever listens to it or not, we'll find out. But that's the we'll see piece in my brain hole that I think about. But you got me going there, man, when you the whole we'll see.
Yeah. It was fun once I realized that it was getting you going. I felt like I pushed it a little further than I needed to, but yeah, the confidence piece, I think that you just talked about, in the fact that you're going to create good content. You can hold on to that, right? That's under your control. You can control whether or not this content is going to be any good. Whether or not people listen to it is out of your control. You can make a great dinner, but if nobody shows up to eat it, there's nothing you can do about that. Maybe they got held in traffic, maybe they just didn't decide to come, whatever. But you can make a great dish, right? So like when it comes to confidence and conviction, I think it's so important that you focus on the parts that you can control, make them as best as you possibly can. And the we'll see is we'll see if they show up for dinner. We'll see if they listen to this podcast. We'll see if they buy it from me. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, listen, I know if as long as your name's attached to it, I'm sure we'll get people to listen to it. So that will I have confidence in that. But let's dive into confidence a little bit further. So I have a big belief that there's different elements of confidence, and in doing my research, came up with these 5 levels of types of confidence that you may have, especially when you're in sales or leadership, right? So we're going to kind of walk through and we'll unpack them. The first one is emotional confidence. It's a feeling-based fuel, right? So I think most people start off every day with the idea like either you're confident for the day or you're not confident for the day. And there's been plenty of days where you start off like with not confidence, and by the end of the day you have extreme confidence. And there's been other days you start really confident and you end with no confidence, right? So like to me, that is the emotional element of confidence that I think too many people put stock in terms of confidence. How do you see that from your viewpoint? Is like, do you feel the same way? Do you feel it? Do you feel like what is your instinct or insight on that?
Yeah, I think you have confidence. I think you have a capability, right? So like, see this mug, right? This is a 40-ounce mug, right? So this mug is capable of carrying 40 ounces. It's not always going to have 40 ounces in it. Sometimes it's going to have 10, sometimes it's going to have 5, sometimes it's going to have 40, right? So confidence, whatever your level of capacity is for confidence, I think is something that you can pay attention to and grow over time through skills, through skill building, through repetition, through working on challenging things, building confidence in creating a larger vessel over time. But day to day, right? Sometimes my 40-ounce vessel is going to have 5 ounces in it. and I have to pay attention to that. I have to pay attention when I pick up my cup. There's not a whole lot in there, so I better fill it. And I think a lot of people lack that moment where they realize, like, I'm a little low. I'm a little low. My vessel can still hold just as much confidence as it could yesterday, but it's not there. So I need to figure that out, right? Before I go try to do the thing that I'm trying to do, I got to make sure that I've got a full cup, not just a cup that's capable of holding that.
Well, I love that, by the way. That's a great, for those that know who I am, like I say, I have goosebumps. It moves me in a very real way. And I think, as you think about even a child, right? Their confidence grows over time, just like their ability to absorb certain elements, right? So if you think about just drinking that 40-ounce thing of water, that may be enough water for a child for the whole day when they're first starting out, right? As you get bigger and you grow, you can take on more water, and depending on how much activity you do, you may need more of that. And you got to kind of refill your cup, right? Confidence is one of these things you can refill. What's interesting, though, is the psychological insights along the way, right? It really impacts the limbic system of your brain, right? This emotional piece of it. And when you're talking about the emotional confidence, there's really a lot of dopamine swings that take place throughout the day, right? So I think it's just like social media, right? People get social media, they put things out there. And then when people like it, people have this idea of like, oh, I must have really good content, or I must look a certain way, or I must do these things. So we associate these kind of validations that gives us this dopamine hit as confidence, right? And it's interesting to see how many people get involved. Then you look at other things where if you put things out there, no one may like it. Doesn't mean anybody's watching it. It just means that no one's engaging with it for whatever reason. And I think that we associate the validation as confidence.
Mm. Yeah.
Like it's
That's especially today. I mean, especially today, by giving people the perspective of social media, right? I think that's a great way to look at things, because we're so impacted by the world of social media, and whether or not somebody likes a photo, whether or not somebody likes a post, how many people liked it. This is concerning now for, children, people growing up in the world full of social media. They take pictures of themselves and post it. If they don't get enough likes, they take it down and do another one. That to me is crazy, right? So in my opinion, you've got to figure out a way to, my vessel is a 40-ounce vessel. I can guarantee you there's going to be people drinking out of your cup, right? You're going to pick it up and there's going to be less water in there because somebody, sucked the confidence out of you or sucked the conviction out of you. And you have to be careful not to be reliant on other people to fill it too, right? You can't just rely on that vessel being filled by other people. You can pretty much count on them taking some, but you have to be cognizant of where's the level and how do you fill the vessel back up, right? Not necessarily what other people are doing.
It's funny because I literally had a conversation earlier today with a sales representative and talking to her about how to get her promoted and what's holding her back. And she was telling me how she's looking around and other people are getting promoted, other people are doing things, and she's not moving ahead. I said, so you got FOMO.
Yeah.
Right? So she's associating how she feels about this based on how other people are seeing, which is a very dangerous situation and creates that emotional confidence, which I think that's the first level of confidence, in my opinion, that most people tend to focus on, is how I'm feeling at the moment. Let's dive into the next one, which is intellectual confidence, right? So that's the knowledge armor. That's like knowing, you training yourself, you're learning, you're reading, you're absorbing along the way. And one of the reasons why I'm so glad to do this podcast with you, Scott, is because the fact is that you actually help put armor on me. And we constantly are sharing ideas and thoughts with each other to make us better, whether it's through books, whether it's through podcasts, whether it's through learning, whether it's your health, whether it's different elements, which we'll get into a little bit. But here's an interesting thing about the intellectual part of confidence, right? It's the belief in your ability to figure things out. I think that is one of the most important things in terms of anything you do is, do you have the ability to figure it out? Do you have the confidence that you can figure it out? Like, I have the confidence in myself. Like, I sucked at this job when I first started here. I was not very good. In fact, there was one time I was literally with tears in my eyes looking at this one not finding success. People are having success around me, and I'm going, what am I doing wrong? But instead of me focusing on that emotional side of it, like I knew I changed my brain structure on I got this. I'll figure it out. Because I knew two things. I can outwork you and I can outlearn you. And that's the elements of what's happening. But I know you talk in terms of, and yes, there's some balloons. If you came across there, that's the Apple side of things, folks. So if you're watching this video, you'll see some balloons popping up, and that's okay because we're all about making things happy. Makes you feel happy inside.
I thought it was a great point, so I released balloons on the screen. That's what happened.
This was an interesting piece when I was doing my research because I know you just talked about this recently on a call that you did with in our organization about meta. But they actually talk about the psychological insight of metacognition, right? And I was like, wow, how ironic. You just talked about meta, and now we're talking about metacognition, which is really the ability to take all things and make them into something great, right? It's some of the sales insights that people can do when it comes to intellectual confidence. And you kind of hinted to this earlier in this conversation. It's not about the hype, getting it just yourself hyped up. I think that's an important piece before you walk into any kind of prospecting call, phone, in person, doesn't matter, or a sales call, is there is an element of hype, which I have an acronym for hype, which I like to share, which is called um, uh, helping yourself prepare excellence. You got to get your help. You got to get yourself jacked up, right? That's got to get hyped.
Yeah.
Or in other ways, help your personal endeavors, right? So you got to hype yourself up along that way. But it's really about the preparation, right? So if you walk in, if you're prepared for things, you're much greater chance of having confidence in the situation versus if you walk in, that's the worst scenario is when someone asks you a question, if you're not prepared, you look like an idiot. Do you have any, like, you tend to have a level of confidence. I know you joke with me all the time, like you're not prepared for different things, but I know you prepare through different elements, through your reading, through your education of different things, Scott.
Yeah.
How do you approach this intellectual part of the confidence thing?
Um, so from a confidence standpoint, right? Like I think the best thing anybody can do, you said when you started in sales, you weren't very good at it and you had to get better. You knew you could outwork people, right? I think one of the biggest things that gets overlooked is anything you're new at or anything you're trying to get good at. If you're doing it right, this is the worst you're ever going to be at it. You have to embrace the fact that you're still learning and you're a beginner at a thing. And it gets harder as you get older. I think as you get good at some things, you start to think that skill translates to other things. And it's hard to be a beginner. It's hard to embrace stinking at something again. Um, and I think it's incredibly important to hold yourself accountable to where you're at with that thing, whatever the thing is, whatever the skill is that you're trying to acquire. Hold yourself accountable, but understand that this is brand new to you and you're supposed to be a beginner. So this is supposed to be the worst you ever are at it. You can build from there. I think the people get themselves in trouble when they expect excellence out of themselves in a new skill set that they're trying to acquire. Like, I think hype is great. I think getting yourself pumped up to do something is great, but hype can get you hurt. Hyping yourself up to fly can only get you so far.
Yeah.
You better have an airplane, right? So I think it's really, really important to have a good, firm grasp on what your capabilities are while you're hyping yourself up, and have an understanding of how to grow your capabilities over time. And I think very, very little emphasis is placed on practice and repetition and its value in growing a skill set, because the more you can condense repetition in time, the better you're going to acquire a skill in a shorter period of time, right? So, accepting the fact that it's not going to be great, but understanding that it's something that you want to get good at is the first step. And then condensing that repetition in time to get better at it and allowing yourself to be a beginner is incredibly important. I think those are the things that I pay most attention to is, am I supposed to be any good at this? Like based on my own experience, based on my own level of repetition. If I'm not any good at ping pong, I shouldn't be mad. If I'm not good at cornhole, I shouldn't be mad. I don't do it. If I want to get better at it, I can either accept the fact that, I'm not any good at it and practice it, or I could just say, I just wasn't born to play cornhole and decide to quit and never do it again. And it's incredibly important to be able to differentiate the two, in my opinion.
But again, that goes back to the knowledge pieces. I know that's one of the things you constantly do is you're constantly feeding yourself, exposing yourself to new ideas and thoughts. It's not just what you're exposed to in even inside our organization, but you're constantly looking outside through other experiences along the way, which I think helps you build that knowledge along the way. I thought it was really interesting what you said though, is too many times people, when you start anything new, this is the worst you're ever going to be at it. As long as you have a plan of attack, which we'll get into in a second, which is really takes to the next piece of this, which I'll ask you to elaborate on this a little bit because which is the next part of this is the physical confidence. That's the body belief, right? Your body reacts a certain way to certain things as you approach them. You can tell a lot about a person when they walk through a door and whether they're how they are going to be for that day. Are they walking in with confidence? You can see people that are defeated before they even open their mouth, just by the way that you approach things, right? So your body's doing it, right? You're influenced by your physical state, right? So people don't take confidence as something you can change your state by just standing up, put your shoulders back a little bit, take some deep breaths and go after it. It could totally change your quote unquote confidence, which is usually again the emotional side of it. But your body has a real indicator of how confidence is going to be for you, right? And you you actually when you walk through the door before you say anything, your confidence is there before you even start. Like just the way you walk through the door before you, so like they say most communication is nonverbal. It begins with your approach, right? And I think your body can indicate a lot. And I know you listen. One of the things I love and respect about you is you share this a lot with a lot of folks. And just I saw you recently try to choke somebody out, in a demo. You do jujitsu, and I know you've been working at it for some time. And it's interesting is how many times I talk to you. You're like, yeah, I just got choked out, or I got this thing, or I got this, and I'm like, that doesn't sound fun, right? Like now, I know you've worked at it. There's some elements of technique, which we'll get into the repetitions and the results after this. But your body, like you had to figure out either you like this or didn't like doing this at some point in time. And just curious from a confidence standpoint, from a body standpoint, how long? Just kind of share with the audience your experience there, and then how long before you're like your body reacted, had confidence in your ability to something that this is something you want to pursue?
I'll let you know when my body catches up to my desire to be good at jujitsu. Um, I think I think jujitsu to me is the most honest thing I've ever been involved in. There's no lying about what you're doing, whether or not you're training, whether or not you're putting in the mat time, whether or not you have trained in the past, whether or not you have technique or accumulating techniques or skills along the way. You can't lie about it, right? So it's an incredible opportunity for people to put themselves in a position where they get the opportunity to learn over time, right? So I've been training jujitsu for 10 years. There are people that have been training for much, much longer than me. There's a lot of people that have been training for less time than me. But all throughout, I've felt like I want to keep on refining my skills and my techniques and my talents through jujitsu. And it's because there's this pursuit towards excellence or perfection that you'll never get to, and the game is constantly evolving and running away from you on top of it, so you're trying to catch something that's not static. And I think it translates back to pretty much everything else in life, where you accept the fact that you're trying to catch something that can't be caught. But holding yourself to that level of accountability is something that, if you can do it, will make you better over time. And you may not ever get to that level of perfection, but the pursuit of it will make you better over time. So that's one thing that I love about jujitsu. I also think um, it's given me a sense of community. It's given me a sense of belonging. It's given me a sense of real challenge. You talk about how I share when somebody chokes me out a couple of times, but mainly chokes me to the point where I get the opportunity to tap, or before something breaks, I'll tap. And do I want to tap? Do I want to concede the fact that I just lost, or that you were better than me in that moment at a thing? Not really, but I should, or else something's going to break, or I'm going to go to sleep, right? So you're forced in that moment to face the fact that you did something wrong, You did something that you could have done better, and then you're faced with the opportunity after that to hone a skill set so that you don't repeat that failure. And that's in isolation, uh, very resonant of like everything else in life, right? If you keep on making mistakes and you're not confronted with the opportunity to fix your mistake, then you're going to continue to make those mistakes over and over again. But if you have that moment, somebody always popped up. Every time you made a mistake, if somebody popped up, it was like, there's that thing again. You should probably address it. You know, how many times would you make that same mistake before you just address it and move on? So I think it's a key for growth.
But it's, I think too, like when I watch your evolution and this one thing you were doing outside and how it's impacted you to in what you do, you have an element of confidence in yourself, just even just the way your posture, right? And it's noticeable to me in terms of your growth that you just approach things differently. And your body, when you walk through the room, and you're again, part of this is your physique, right? So confidence also comes through taking care of yourself. So the physical side of this is not just necessarily how you approach some things, but it's how you feel about yourself and what you do. And if you're going to talk to somebody about weightlifting, you better look like you've lifted some weights, right? Like if you're going to talk to somebody about how to do something, you better have demonstrated in some way, have the actionable parts, to do the doing part. You know, it's like I love to tell people all the time, like be Mountain Dew and do the do. You got to do the do if you really want to have the physical elements that come along with that confidence, right? So you may have it emotionally, you may have it intellectually, but if your body's not incongruent of it, like I recently sent you a video and you about I think it was a jiu-jitsu or just about martial arts in general. And the guy was talking about how your spine, if your spine's not correct, if you're out of line, you'll lose your weakness, right? And it makes me think about this, right? So like even your body, if you may have those other two things in play, but if your body's not in believing everything else is going on, you may not be as confident in that moment along the way. And you were like very clear to me, tell me back when I showed you that video, like that's spot on. And I sent you another video where it was the guy and you got like, I want to go to that gym to save my life, right? But you know, it's that's where you're using your intellectual confidence in terms of like giving me some insights, which I thought was quite interesting. But I think again, just if your whole part of these 5 levels are in line, your chances of success are much greater, which leads me to the next part of this. And this is the part you kind of referenced multiple times already, which is the experiential confidence. This is the reps and results. And confidence is built on repetition, past and present, right? So you have to continue to doing it because you mentioned before about, you know, which you can go back and reference on your jiu-jitsu part of this, where you were saying like you can tell if whether someone's been doing it or not relatively quick, right? And this part of it is the procedural memory that comes into play. And there's a great book called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. Highly recommend people that either you're in sales, leadership, or even just a parent read it. It really breaks down how to become talented in anything, and it really kind of walks through some of the hotbeds on different parts in Russia where there's a lot of tennis people that come out of this particular area, and it kind of walks through in Brazil and different elements, even the Dominican on baseball players, which was why are all these little hotbeds happening? And they really talk about some of these reps, these breaking it down along the way. And as you were talking earlier, I just maybe reference why did I become successful in this job? Is that I told you I can outwork you and I can outlearn you. And when I started though, is that notice I said first is I can outwork you and then I can outlearn you. And I learned quickly that I can get better faster by doing more reps, taking a break. But I was doing 60 doors a day where everybody else around me was doing 10. So at the end of any given week, they did 50, I did 300. I was 200, I had 250 more reps than they did. At the end of the month, that's 1,200 versus 200. That adds up quickly, right? And so you get better much quicker along the way. And then you take the go back to the intellectual part of confidence, you're learning from it as you talk about along the way. It just helps you get better, and then therefore you get more confident. And again, I would love for you to kind of go back to your moment of time when you first started doing jiu-jitsu and how you felt when you first started into where you are today, right? Which we'll get into here in a second. But even if today feels off, right? Your reps can make you feel more automatic. There's certain things I can go cold call right now. Doesn't matter where I'm at in any part of the country. I'm going to do the exact same way. I don't have to doing it. I know it's going to come out of it because I've done it so many times. The reps are there that it just takes me right back there. Now, there's some elements of my job that if I went back to doing it, I'd have to take a little more. I have a little more rust I'd have to knock off me because I don't do it as frequently as what's happening. So a perfect example is like phone calls. Could I do more phone calls? Yeah, the process is still the same, but I'd be a little clunky versus I'm in person because when I did get a chance to get out in the marketplace and spend time with people, it's usually the physical side that's walking through some doors, right? But you mentioned this numerous times about that jujitsu, which I think is one of those core things for you that has helped you build on this multiple times through a lot of your conversations with people. And I'm just interested, Scott, when you first started this out, because I'm sure like you're doing, like you were probably humbled quickly your first time to where you are today. And even though there's times when you know it's happening, probably, and I'm generally interested in this, but I don't think we've ever discussed this, but I'm sure there's people that you spar with that in most days you can kick their butt, and every once in a while they get you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so in the beginning, so anything that I want to do, or any skill that I want to acquire, like I usually share my story about my Rubik's Cube, right? So any skill that I want to acquire, the first thing that I have to do is decide whether or not it's something that I want to do, because I know that if it's something that I want to do, I'll invest the time, I'll invest the energy, money, sometimes that it is necessary to get good at the thing that I want to do. And it's the first gut check, right? Like, do I really want this or do I not want this? If I don't want it, then don't pursue it. The second thing is there somebody else that has that skill? And if I can identify somebody that has a skill that I want to acquire, then that gives me the opportunity to look at the third thing. And if there's a person, do they have a process? So the third thing is, do they have a process? And if they have a process, can I steal it? Right? Can I replicate it? Somebody just made a comment to me on Facebook about something that said I was cheating, and I said I've been cheating since middle school. Why would I change now? It's I don't necessarily need to invent the way to do everything. I think it's more efficient for me to emulate somebody that's already doing it or has it. And then after, look, do I want to do it? Is there a person that can do it? If that person can do it, do they have a process? And then number four is repetition, 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 right? So like repeat the process over and over and over again until it's mine. So in the beginning, yes, jujitsu was a thing where I think for the vast majority of people that step into a jujitsu school, that first class, you're either very aware that this is something that you want to learn, or very aware that it's something that you never want to do again. Um, and it's for multiple reasons, right? A lot of it's got to do with ego. Again, hype can get you hurt. Thinking that you can fight versus actually executing that against somebody who's trained to fight are two different things. So some people can't live with the reality that somebody's training to do that. This is not just like, oh, I'll see red, bro, type of a situation, and you'll be able to fight. It just doesn't work like that. People are training for that situation, and they're going to be better at it than you. People are training the way that you said you were training when you were early in your sales career, 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 times harder than other people. And the accumulation of that repetition is one thing, but then also the opportunity for you to learn, right? You're giving yourself more data to learn lessons by giving yourself more repetition than you are to other people. So you're just going to compress that learning curve as much as possible by increasing repetition. So in the beginning, I was terrible at jujitsu, but it was a game that I didn't know. And there was people that physically were probably less intimidating than I thought they should be, that kicked my butt, right? So they were just better at the game than I was. And then I decided that was the skill set that I wanted to acquire, right? So then after that, learning that the school had a process, it was just repetition, repetition, repetition. Now here we are, it's 10 years down the road, and repetition. I wake up at 4:30 in the morning, I go to the gym, and I do jujitsu in the morning because I think it's good for me. I have a bunch of people that are hoping that I show up so they can do jujitsu too, and it's been good. So that it translates to a lot of other things, that process.
Well, it's funny. I'm going to give you this because it just hit me as I'm writing this down, right? 5 P's. So this is for somebody that's paying attention. And again, I'll repeat it back to you. One, do you have the passion? You have to find out if you have the passion. The second thing is there's a person that you can learn from. Then is there a process? Then comes the practice of that process, which then leads to performance. So the 5 P's of this elements along the way, you kind of just said that there. I'm putting a nice little bow on it for you,
You
but
did.
you person, person, process, practice, performance, right? Which leads to the last one, which is the fifth type of confidence, which is identity confidence. It's a core belief, right? And confidence is rooted in who you believe you are. And it's really self-concept theory, right? Winners don't rely on mood, they rely on identity. That's why I think you were bugging me when you were saying, we'll see, because I know who I am and I know what I've been through. My core belief is I believe we will make this something great, right? And that's where it's my core belief in me and what my abilities are that lead me to the growth that I want to have. Is I also, kind of giving people always want to know, like, how did you come to getting the name coach, right? So I started coaching my kids in soccer, right? And it made me stop and think about what's coaching all about. It's making people better, taking them where they are and making them better, which is really the form of leadership that I get the most enjoyment out of. It's I'm not asking you to be me. I don't want to manage you, right? I don't mind leading you. Leading you is about leading you down a certain way, giving you some directional pieces of it, casting a vision of where we're headed. So I believe this, and I don't want to be your boss. Now, do I have to wear these hats different times? Yeah, but in the end, I want to be a coach, right? And so, like, that idea of the core belief of coaching that I put on myself makes me want to be a better coach. So I have to live up to my core beliefs, right? And just like you have certain core beliefs, which is why you and I became friends a long time ago. For those that don't know, we share the same birth date, and we came across this by accident on a meeting that we were both at, and just so happens that at midnight on the 3rd of April, we both happy birthday and was like, what? We were sitting in the same ring. And then from that point in time, I felt like we were stepbrothers in that moment in time. We're like, did we just become friends kind of thing? And since then, it's been one thing that's united us because we have something in common. And then we've found out other passions along the way. And yes, I have certain things I'd like to lean toward. You have certain things along the way, but I love that part of who you are because your core belief of who you are, you want to become greater and better. And one of the things I respect about you, Scott, and this is one of your core beliefs, is your health, right? You've really taken a real high commitment toward being the best version of yourself, not just for yourself, but also for your job, but mainly for your family, for your future, all these other pieces of it, right? And like I heard a quote, and then I'll love to hear your thoughts on this. It made me think about you the other day. And it said this: when you're healthy, you have 1,000 problems. When you're sick, you have one. And it kind of really hit me there on that piece of it. But these are some of your core beliefs that help lead you to some of these other modes: the emotional confidence, the intellectual confidence, the physical confidence, and the experiential confidence along the way. Um, you know, talk about how you are, because I consider you one of the goats that in my life where I go, who are the people that I can rely on and go to that just not just a work relationship, but most of the time we start off with our conversation and then we end up talking about something completely different. We probably talk like 2 or 3 minutes on whatever we're calling about. But next thing you know, we're having a intellectual conversation along the way. So
Yeah. So you mentioned the video that you sent me, right, where the martial artist was showing if your spine is out of alignment, your strength disappears, right? You're not strong anymore. Um, that's the way that I look at health or wellness. I mean, just think about it from the standpoint of if you stayed out too late last night, you woke up, you're tired. How's your decision making?
good
If
point.
you're tired, right, that's like your spine alignment. If things are out of alignment, everything else pays the price, or everything else is affected. Maybe it's not paying the price. Maybe if everything is in alignment, you benefit from that. I was exposed to something called the five regrets of the dying, uh, probably like 10 or 12 years ago. Five regrets of the dying, and there was a palliative care nurse who interviewed a bunch of people that were in hospice care, asking them the regrets that they had in life, and they came down to like five regrets. And I don't want to ruin them because I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but it were things like I wish I would have spent more time with my family. I wish I would have lived more true to myself. I wish I would have been happier, things like that. So at that time, I thought, well, if I'm staying true to myself and I'm copying off of other people, how can I? If those are the five regrets that most people have when they're dying, how do I avoid that? How can I? If I can avoid those five things, um, I know I'll have regrets probably on my deathbed, but if I can avoid those, then I avoid the ones that are most common. So I decided to make some changes, right? How do I avoid those five pitfalls that people on their deathbed regret the most? That was important to me. And then from a health standpoint, started to become important to me because I saw some family members that got sick or passed from things that they probably didn't deserve, or maybe they did deserve, or maybe they was younger than I thought that they should deserve something like that, or something like that should happen to them. So I took the same approach to health that I did to regrets on death, right? Like, how do I prevent the things that most often hurt people from a health standpoint or a longevity standpoint? And the easiest way that I can probably, I'm not a doctor and I'm not in medicine, but I can tell you that the way that I understand it is there's the four things. 80% of people are going to die from cognitive disabilities, heart disease, cancers, and then diabetes, I think, are the four things. So if that's what takes out 80% of people, how do I avoid those things? I can't avoid a bus or train hitting me necessarily. Well, I guess I could,
Stay
but
home. Yeah, stay home.
I ought to. But how do I avoid those things? So I think one of the things that I look at when it comes to these big topics in my life is how do I learn from other people, and how do I avoid the things that most people would be affected by. And if I can avoid those things, then something will affect me, but it won't be the most obvious of things, right? So that's why I decided to change, the way that I look at health and the way that I look at um, preventative health, longevity. How do I have um, a body that's going to be able to do things and do the things that I want it to do for the longest period of time? I better start paying attention to that now before it becomes a crisis situation.
Well, you've done an incredible job on that, and kind of like I love the fact you brought up the science, right? So diving into a little bit further, going back to the topic of confidence and conviction, right? I wanted to find out my beliefs were that confidence comes first and it leads to conviction. And from a psychological standpoint, confidence does come first, right? But here's what it says: small proofs lead to belief, repetition leads to identity, identity leads to unshakable conviction, right? So it's these small little steps along the way. So again, another way to look at it is small action builds confidence, repeated action reinforces identity, deepens conviction. When you keep doing something over and over again, and for those that do know me, you know this story that I was in a stupid reading class and in school, and I sucked at reading, and I hated reading because along the way, and I had this deep conviction that I sucked at reading because of being in environments along the way that just kind of reinforced my thoughts on this. And it wasn't until I got into sales that I started to read some other things outside of it and realizing the benefit from reading. And now reading is one of my superpowers. And I know in today's environment that people want to talk about reading, like audiobooks, which is better than nothing, or watching a video, which is better than nothing. But the deep learning begins when you stop and you specialize on a subject, or you specialize on doing something over and over again. Hence that 10,000 hour rule, which you've heard people say multiple times. But you can actually shorten that with the right amount of repeated steps over and over again. You don't have to take 10,000 hours of doing it, right? You can accelerate that through many different things that you're even discussing, right? Which I thought, again, and go back to really the five P's. as I listened to you say it again, you talked about passion. Your passion was, I don't want to have these negative things. Is there a person you can learn from? You kind of learn from this book that you were reading about it, right? You figured out a process. Well, how do I doing it? You've been practicing it along the way, and it's leading to you this performance, right? Like you're living that element over and over again in your life, right? And at some point in time, when we do another one of these, Scott, I'll ask you to tell your story about your Rubik's Cube scenario, which is an interesting piece along the way. But kind of to wrap this up, right? So kind of thinking through, like, how does someone start building better confidence and conviction? And I have some ideas, and I'd love to get your 2 cents. Here's some ideas that I would say to you, some five simple ways of doing this. And if you have anything here you want to add to, or even a different thought, that's great, because that's what this is all about. Baskin Robbins makes 31 flavors for a reason, baby, because not everyone likes chocolate or vanilla. So first one is, like, to build confidence in yourself, is make and keep promises to yourself daily. So if you're going to do something, do it. That's the best way to build confidence in yourself, is that through self-discipline, in my opinion. Build self-trust is the root of conviction. So if you can follow through on your own things, hence, as we broke down the word, confidence is trust in yourself. That's the best way to doing it. Whatever you say, follow through. Right? If you work for an organization, they're paying you to do something, follow through. Do it when you don't want to, right? Even with uncertainty. The second thing is micro wins and learning. So there's big things I love to talk about is wins and grins. So what was your win of the day? What was your grin of the day? It's none of my favorite things to do at the end of the day is to have that when talk to somebody going, so talk to me. What was your win of the day? Right? Because it's too easy to be negative, right? And that helps reinforce confidence, that builds on the emotional side of it, but also the intellectual side of it, right? Speaker goals out loud, right? Like, I wanted to have this podcast, and you and I have been talking about this for some time, about doing this, and we just finally said, let's make it happen. And now we are. And what you do is you activate your RAS, which most people may not know what that is. It's your reticular activating system. It's that confirmation bias kind of mindset, where if you think about something, you start seeing it. So if you wanted to buy a red Tesla, I guarantee you're going to start seeing more Teslas, and then you'll probably see more red Teslas, because you're looking for it. So when you're speaking your goals out loud, you have a better chance of making it happen along the way. And then, again, 3 things you did well for the day. Again, this goes back to those wins and grins. Like, what did you do to benefit yourself? Like, stop beating yourself up for all the things you didn't go well, right? Like, even when you got your butt kicked in, I'm sure in jiu-jitsu, you still learned something along the way, and you still, obviously, there was an enjoyment out of there. Even though you lost, quote unquote, you gained, right? And, like, we have to remember, sometimes in those losses that we have throughout our days, there's tremendous gain they'd be doing it. You just can't see it right now, because it's like your root system's growing. People don't realize about, I wrote this book called The Great Oak. And it's about how everyone has a great oak inside them. And what's interesting is, recently I heard that we always think about what we see, right? But when an oak's growing, it grows up and down at the same time. It grows in the dark and it grows in the light. So sometimes we grow in our darkest moments. We have our biggest gains of growth, which lead to even bigger growth that everybody else sees, right? And I think it's too many times we got to remind ourselves of this. And the last thing that I have for the 5, and I'd love to hear your if you have anything that you think would be great to share with everybody else, Scott, love to hear it. But learn one, teach one, right? So the fastest way to get better at anything is learn it and then teach it. Because what's really interesting about this concept is, when you have to teach it, you learn it again. And sometimes you find yourself being reinforced along the way, as we talk about, again, going back to some of the things that you've shared already today. That practice part of it is sometimes learning, is teaching other people, right? And too many times, if you set out, like, listen, I'm going to be so good at this, I can teach it to somebody else, watch your confidence grow, because your brain has to then function in a different way than it ever did before. Do you have anything here you want to add, like, Scott, in terms of your advice to people listening, at home or on their computer, that you'd say, hey, any other steps that you would encourage people to take?
The only thing that I would add is just, like, assess where you're at from a confidence standpoint. If your confidence is super low and you want to grow in confidence, I think those steps are great. But I would also, like, just take inventory of where you're at and don't ask yourself to do too much on that first step. So if you can find an easier win to start stacking little wins over time, you're going to find yourself in a much better situation over time to build confidence. I would just be mindful of the fact that if you're asking yourself to do a task that you're not ready to do, you're going to set yourself back a little bit. So give yourself the opportunity to win a little bit along the way. And I think those steps that Tim just gave you all the way through to teaching something, which is a whole nother learning process for yourself. If you can teach something, if you can learn to articulate what it is you're doing, it gives you another level of mastery of that subject. So you'll be even more confident. I couldn't agree more. And then the 5-piece t-shirt on boomeffect.com. That's what you need to do.
Yeah, we're going to sell that thing, man. So, but we're going to kind of wrap this up, and I want to leave you with this thought, right? Confidence comes from action, and conviction comes from alignment, right? So, the best way to gain confidence is to do something. Because here's what I do know: nobody has to plant weeds. Anything left alone is not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. So, no matter where you are, what you're doing, do something. Right? So here's what we're going to challenge you to do. Just remember, confidence is the seed, conviction is the root system. And we're going to challenge you on the Boom Podcast is over the next 7 days, pick one of the things that we just discussed. Pick an element here that you may just start somewhere, as Scott was just talking about, and just build on it slowly. And remember, here at the Boom Podcast, we're always about this, building our outstanding mindset. That's what brings the boom, baby. We're going to bring the boom, and then the effect it will have on your life and grow along the way. That's it for us. My name's Tim, Coach Scholze, and this is my man, the GOAT, Scott, the GOAT Terrizzi. We appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us today, and we hope you have a great, great day and go build that confidence. We'd love to hear from you. Like this, follow this, share with other people, tell your friends, because we will be back. That's it for now. Adios.
If you enjoyed this podcast, we would ask you to help us make it flow better by following the podcast. Like the content where you absorb it, like our IG page @Boom Effect Podcast. Only comment positively, which includes constructive feedback. Watch us on YouTube or other video platforms. And remember, when we build our outstanding mindset, we bring the boom.